All right, welcome. Looks like we got people starting to filter in here, so we'll give it a few seconds. But I want to say hello and thank you to our 50 plus people here and more coming in. Welcome to the Distilled Spirits Council Ask the Expert webinar series. I am Ross Mulcairn, Director of Member Services and Business Development at the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, better known as DISCUS. Today's topic is Fact versus Fiction, Direct Consumer Shipping Spirits Shipping Demystified, with friends from the Discus team and Sovos Ship Compliant. We are recording this webinar so that it will be available on our member portal as well as on the Discus YouTube channel. For those of you who are not as familiar, Discus is the leading voice and advocate for our members and the distilled spirits industry overall here in the United States. If you are a member of Discus, or even if you are not, Discus provides a wealth of resources and services, including this webinar series, that aims to educate and to share relevant trends, ideas, resources, discussions, and opportunities for our spirits suppliers. If you are interested in these webinars, all of our upcoming webinars are listed at distilledspirits.org/events. And be sure to check in Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern for future Ask the Expert webinars. We actually have another webinar exactly 1 week from right now with our friends from Proof 8 that we encourage you all to attend. That at the end of this webinar, we will include a registration link for that for those of you who are interested. Now, I want to make sure I welcome today's speakers and experts. We have Bob Budoff, the Senior Vice President for Legal and Regulatory Affairs here at Discus. We also have Andy Deloney, our Senior Vice President and Head of State Public Policy at Discus, and also Alex Coral, Regulatory General Counsel at Sovos Ship Compliant. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, our experts and I are going to talk for about 35-40 minutes, and then we will save some time for Q&A at the end. You all will see on your screen there's a Q&A button and a chat feature. You are welcome to use either one to submit questions that you have. We will take them throughout the conversation. So we're going to be chatting. We want this to be an interactive experience. If you have a question about anything that's come up, feel free to submit it, and we will try to answer that question as best we can while making sure that we reserve some time at the end just for Q&A if you have anything that you want to know that maybe is not touched on in the middle of the thing. Next week, we will send everyone a link to this webinar recording, those who attended and registered. And again, it will live on our YouTube channel and in our member portal. If you have any questions about this webinar series or anything, feel free to reach out to us at membership@distilledspirits.org. Now, that was the fun housekeeping part. Let's go ahead and get started into the meat of the issue, why everyone is here and what everyone wants to know about, which is direct-to-consumer shipping of spirits. Bob, I'll go ahead and start with you. Right now, I know we have...
Oh.
No,
yes.
You're good.
Okay, great.
Go ahead. You know what? You know what I'm going to ask. Everyone knows what I'm going to ask. There's a lot of states with different laws and different things. Can you go ahead and give us an overview primer, let people know where we're standing right now and what they need to know from the top as we get started?
I was just about to address that, actually. So thank you, Ross, and thanks everyone for attending today. I'm going to focus on two matters. One of them is a review of the states that allow DTC for spirits. The other one, I'm going to go briefly into the DTC principles for spirits that were adopted by our Discus board back in 2021 and revised in 2022. And I'm going to focus on states allowing shipping of spirits directly to consumers by the upper tier. The upper tier includes all domestic spirits producers, as well as foreign-produced spirits shipped by importers. What I'm not discussing generally is other kinds of shipping, like direct shipments from retailers or wholesalers to consumers, or indirect shipments where, for example, a state requires a supplier to ship the product to a retail store or to a control state facility for consumer delivery or pickup. And I'm also not talking about so-called personal imports where a consumer arranges for a product to be shipped to it without any supplier involvement in the shipping. Under these parameters, I count 10 states plus DC allowing direct shipment of spirits in one form or another to consumers. Many of these laws were modeled in large part on the wine DTC laws, and as you know, DTC for wine is allowed in almost every state. There are, however, a number of significant differences in the practices allowed among the 11 jurisdictions allowing DTC for spirits. I start with the only 3 states, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and North Dakota, that allow DTC of spirits by in-state and out-of-state distillers absent any production caps for these shippers, which excludes many larger and medium-sized distillers. A few brief comments about Kentucky and Pennsylvania. Kentucky is the first state that Discus was an active proponent in DTC legislation, which was enacted in 2020 and revised in 2021. It includes many of the provisions that Discus recommends in its DTC principles. Kentucky is also only one of only 3 states that allows importers of foreign spirits to direct ship to consumers. The Kentucky DTC law was amended to repeal language that was interpreted to ban fulfillment houses, a ban we opposed. The other state with a note, I have a note on of these 3, is Pennsylvania. The permissibility of DTC for out-of-state as well as in-state distillers was clarified and confirmed by the LCB Chief Counsel in mid-2024. I think there was some confusion in the regulated community and the marketplace as to whether it was permissible. The distiller is required to hold one of the 2 types of Pennsylvania distillery licenses, distillery or a limited distillery license. The latter is for smaller distillers. There's no requirement to have a physical presence in Pennsylvania. And the Chief Counsel also made it clear that under the Granum decision, the same rules apply to direct shipping to both in-state and out-of-state entities. Direct shippers, however, are not allowed to offer specific codes of spirits at prices that are lower than those charged by the PLCB for the same product. Separately, the 2024 RTD legislation in Pennsylvania, establishing the RTD cocktail product category, that's a 12.5% limit and a 16-ounce original container limit. That legislation addresses DTC for RTD cocktails, and it only permits certain distillers to conduct these shipments, these direct shipments. These distillers either have to hold a limited distillery license, which I said is for smaller distilleries, or they held that license prior to July 1st, 2024, and subsequently acquired a distillery license, which is for the bigger distillers. The next state on my list is New York. New York enacted a DTC law in 2024, allowing spirits DTC by in-state and out-of-state distillers, but subject to 2 major limitations. First is the production cap, which is 75,000 gallons annually. Second is the reciprocity requirement, which provides that out-of-state distillers may obtain a New York DTC license only if their state provides substantially equivalent direct shipping privileges to New York distillers wishing to direct ship to consumers in the out-of-state shipper state. Because most states don't allow spirit DTC, this restriction means that distillers in most states cannot direct ship to New York consumers. We oppose both production limits and reciprocity requirements. They not only exclude many distillers from engaging in DC, but they also stymie consumer choice. There are thousands of spirits products that consumers cannot access in local sales outlets, and tourists and visitors to distilleries in other states frequently are prohibited to have products shipped home. Consumers should have the same ability and convenience for spirits that has been available for wine in almost all states for several decades. Consumers should simply be able to obtain the products that they want. There's also a serious issue regarding the constitutionality of reciprocity agreements. Although no court has ever ruled directly on point, the U.S. Supreme Court raised its concern in its Granum opinion, where it stated, quote, "The perceived necessity for reciprocal sales privileges risks generating the trade rivalries and animosities, the alliances and exclusivity that the Constitution, and in particular the Commerce Clause, were designed to avoid," close quote. Next 2 states that I'm listing are New York and Nebraska and Washington, D.C. Both jurisdictions allow DTC to their consumers by out-of-state but not in-state distillers. Also, DC also allows direct shipping to consumers by importers. Next 2 states are Alaska and Arizona. Both states allow direct shipping by in-state and out-of-state distillers, but for each limit DTC to smaller distillers, with the annual production of a distillery limited to a maximum of 50,000 proof gallons in Alaska and 20,000 proof gallons in these states. I'm sorry, in Arizona. The Alaska law became effective in the beginning of 2024 on January 1st. Prior to that, direct shipping was not regulated, was basically allowed under any conditions. But of course, you have to note, as in many states, that Alaska has numerous dry localities where shipping to consumers would be prohibited. Now we turn to California, and beginning during the pandemic, and with one short gap, California has been allowing direct shipping only by licensed craft distillers, which are in-state distillers with annual production not exceeding 150,000 gallons annually, thus excluding all out-of-state distillers, which would be subject to a random challenge. And the same challenge, of course, would apply to New York, Alaska, and Arizona. To remedy this in California, legislation was very recently signed into law by the governor, extending the availability of direct shipping to similarly sized out-of-state distillers. The in-state only law continues to be in effect until its January 1st, 2026 expiration date. The new law extending this to out-of-state distillers then takes effect, but it expires 1 year later on January 1st, 2027. Next, I turn to Vermont. Vermont has direct shipping in its spirits RTD beverage law, and RTDs are up to 12% ABV, and also limited to containers, smaller containers up to 24 fluid ounces. That law expressly allows direct shipping of these products to consumers by both in and out-of-state distillers, but there is no permitted direct shipping of any other kind of spirit. And then the last of these 10 states that I have is New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a little complicated and confusing, but when you tease it all out, the way I read it, it allows direct shipping of spirits to consumers by in-state distillers, by out-of-state importers who sell non-US product, and by in and out of state manufacturers and distributors of certain low-proof beverages containing spirits, up to 8% ABV limit. There simply is no law in New Hampshire that allows all out-of-state distillers to ship their spirits directly to consumers in the state. And I do mention one other state that I don't really consider a direct ship state, and that's Rhode Island. Although they do allow direct shipment, they require that the consumer be present physically at the distillery to place the order for the shipment. And now I turn to the Discus DTC principles. The Discus board approved 10 general principles back in the early 2020s that should be adhered to in efforts to secure or shape direct shipping legislation for spirits. 1, treat all types of beverage alcohol, beer, wine, and spirits equally. 2, treat in-state and out-of-state products equally. This includes not giving a preference to in-state product by either requiring a consumer to physically place an order in person at the distillery, which I mentioned before is the case in Rhode Island, or setting a production cap that allows small in-state distillers but prohibits larger out-of-state distillers from direct shipping. I note that there are several conflicting federal court decisions on the constitutionality of the face-to-face purchase requirement, and there's one decision finding unconstitutional production levels that protected the ability of smaller in-state wineries to direct ship, while barring the practice for larger out-of-state wineries. The two conflicting decisions on face-to-face are from the 6th and the 6th and 7th circuits, and the one saying that it was constitutional was from the 9th Circuit. And the case that found the protection of smaller in-state distillers was in the 1st Circuit. I can provide those citations if anyone would like them. The third DTC principle is to ensure product and three-tier system integrity by limiting direct shippers to licensed producers or importers who are the brand owners or their authorized agents. For example, ensuring primary source protection and that licensed retailers may not hold a supplier DTC license. 4, support reasonable limitations on quantity shipped to a consumer. For example, a level proportional to the per consumer limit for direct ship of wine in that state. Number 5, allow suppliers to ship through their own operations and or third-party providers, such as a fulfillment center, in a timely, efficient, and cost-effective manner. And 6, allow DTC spirit sales only in areas of a state where sales are permitted by law. 7, ensure full payment of applicable excise and sales taxes to the state where the product is delivered, but no double taxation, such as if a tax were imposed by the out-of-state direct shipper state. 8, treat U.S. and foreign products equally. 9, require effective safeguards against underage purchases, including the label that the product contains alcohol and an adult signature is required for delivery. Also allowing delivery only to a person with a valid ID and requiring age verification and the recipient's signature at delivery. And 10, require alcohol direct shippers and carriers to maintain detailed records of their DTC-related activity to be made available upon request to the state alcohol or taxing authority. That's my presentation. I apologize if I spoke quickly, but I wanted to make sure there was enough time for the next two speakers. Thank you.
Well done, Bob. We appreciate that. And I would like to thank everyone who is taking notes. So now everyone knows everything that there is on DTC. We've all got a great understanding of the framework as it stands across our country right now. And we already have questions coming in, and I'm excited to get to those. Please keep sending them in. I do want to just get a little bit further into our talk to make sure that we're addressing everything we need to do. And Alex, I would love to sort of turn to you now. Bob did a wonderful job of like laying out the groundwork of where we're at, what are all the states, how do they differ? If I am a new brand or an existing brand distiller that wants to get into the DTC shipping, what is sort of what is the next step? You know, how do I take these wonderful notes that I just wrote down from Bob's great presentation and put it into effect for, the marketing benefits or whatever it is of the DTC process?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here today. And this is definitely a very exciting topic, something that has been very near to me for basically my entire career here at Sova Ship Compliant. We are a software company that provides compliance support for distilleries, wineries in doing direct shipping and interstate distribution in a general way. We've been at this for over 20 years. And so we have seen a lot of developments within this market and how it has grown from essentially a sort of very niche, very low-key sort of market into something that is now interesting for everybody. We see the wine industry having really succeeded, having nearly national growth. It's a $4 billion on average industry market per year. And so it's great to see the spirits industry jumping on this as well. And I think that the thing to recognize first when you are a distillery looking at direct shipping is first you want to understand what the opportunities are, what is available for you. There are, of course, all the marketing considerations, where you actually have consumers, where you can actually then distribute your products to, who can you sell to, how can you establish those markets. But as Bob was going over, the really critical thing about this market is how highly regulated and restricted it is. And I think that really that's the first part that everybody should recognize is there are rules around this and there are restrictions, and they must be followed if you want to be a compliant member, not only of the direct consumer shipping market, but of the beverage alcohol industry in general. Because if you are not doing things right when you're doing direct consumer shipping, that can be reason for a state regulatory agency to question your compliance in general, your validity as a distiller, and question whether your licenses should be renewed. And so there are a lot of knock-on effects here if you are doing things wrong. And at the end of the day, it is your name on the bottle's label. So even if some other party is involved, if you're working with somebody that says things are compliant, If that does not align with the rules of the state, then the state is going to be asking you some difficult questions about why these shipments were made and why this illegal potentially activity occurred. And so I think that, again, the first thing to do is to really listen to a webinar like this, go out there, recognize what the rules are, what the limitations are. And to a great degree, that means first recognizing that this is a very limited market, at least for spirits at this point. As Bob said, there is a great example within the wine industry. They have really built out a very established, effective market for this. And I think that there is a lot of opportunity and availability for spirits to grow into this. But we're not quite there yet. We need to have a lot more bills pass in more states, more regulatory rulemaking go down, and just make this a much more functional and available market. So again, we need to recognize where it is available. As Bob said, there are about 10 states plus the District of Columbia where they are allowed. Each state has their own unique rules of laws that need to be followed. You can't say, well, Kentucky lets me do this, so New York should let me do this as well. Each state is different, and under the principles of the 21st Amendment and the Granholm Supreme Court case that Bob alluded to, you have to follow the rules of the destination state. So you can't even say, well, I'm in Kentucky, I can ship, so therefore I can ship to Tennessee, I can ship to Ohio. Again, it is always the destination state's rules that apply. And they are unique. So you need to make sure you have that unique license in each state. You need to make sure you are abiding by the unique volume limits that those states have, whether they are, 1 case per month, 12 cases per year. States are tracking these things. Make sure you are working with legitimate carriers who are going to be checking IDs at the time of delivery. This is one of the most important parts of this industry, something that states take very seriously and are cracking down on. Even within the wine shipping market, they are constantly doing age checks. So you want to make sure that you are not even accidentally selling to anybody under 21, all these sort of things that might happen in your tasting room. Basically the rule is that just because it's the internet does not make these things right. There are a lot of rules within the alcohol industry that we need to be following. One of the big things that Bob alluded to was the tax payments. This is a principle within direct shipping broadly, and it is in essentially every state that allows wine shipping. The rules are that the out-of-state shipper must pay the destination state's excise taxes and sales taxes. It's not every state. There's a lot of complicated jurisprudence around sales taxes. I don't know if your audience has been too aware of what has happened the last about 7 years around economic nexus and Amazon taxes, but I'm sure they're aware that there are a lot more states looking to tax out-of-state businesses when you're selling online. This has been a very standard thing within the direct shipping market, again, for the last 20 years. States have imposed sales tax obligations on shippers. Of course, that does mean you can deduct them from your home state. So I think that, as Bob was fearing, the risks of double taxation are less so in this industry, as long as you're filing your reports right and recognizing what is being delivered where. But again, it is very important, and this is one of those things that if a state recognizes you are not paying your taxes, they're going to remove your license, and that means you can't ship there anymore. And if you lose a license, that may be reason for your home state to wonder, what are you doing wrong in these other states? Are you still a legitimate, valid member of this industry that we want to continue to license? So again, this is just a matter of recognizing the responsibility that goes into this, and recognizing that the responsibility falls on you as the distillery, as the person who has your name on the label. That is where the buck is going to stop at the end of the day. And part of this, I think, then is also recognizing, as we know there are these rules out there, as we know there are these strict procedures for how states think direct-to-consumer shipping should work, you need to differentiate those sort of clearly articulated statutory rules versus a lot of the more questionable, let's say, offerings that some parties are out there. There is a lot of confusing information around direct-to-consumer shipping, a lot of confusion around how it can work, and some attorneys are out there, some businesses are out there saying that they have figured out some loopholes, and I can tell you, I take a very conservative approach. We at Silver Ship Compliant take a very conservative approach to shipping and say, you need to follow these rules strictly. So I cannot speak directly to any one program. I cannot speak to this entirely, but a lot of these services out there seem very questionable to me and are saying things that are not very legitimate. And I think if you go to the state regulators and you ask them, hey, I want to use this service, can I do it? The regulators would be very emphatically no about that. And so
I
this is just sort of a lesson to not necessarily trust things you read on the internet and talk to your attorneys and talk to experts and figure this out and do it right.
Hey, Alex, I'm glad you actually mentioned that. And I'm going to cut you off really quick
Yeah,
because
yeah.
our first question that we just had come in was talking about almost this exact issue. It's someone is mentioning the state of Colorado had an issue where there was someone who was using a third-party shipper for an in-state distiller to in-state residences using a third-party logistics company, and the state liquor board said, no, not allowed. We're gonna shut that down. You could lose your entire distillery license. So, but I think a lot of people have questions about, things that seem to be in compliance for them, but they don't understand. I'm assuming this is not the first time a question like this has come across your desk.
Yeah, no, it's a very common question, something we've seen a lot. And again, I am an attorney myself, and the first thing you learn in law school is that it always depends. So I can't speak to what happened in this particular situation. Maybe they had something going on. However, I'm also a resident of Colorado and have spoken to the director of the LED about these sort of things. And I know that Colorado specifically, there are no rules that would allow a consumer, a individual resident like myself, to receive a package of spirits that is delivered by a common carrier. The only way that I can have spirits brought to my house is through a local retailer delivering it in their vehicle with their employees. And so, it's just the unfortunate restrictions in my state. Whenever I see a petition to change the laws, I do sign up for that. I think that these need to be updated. I think there needs to be availability for shipping in Colorado and elsewhere. But no, it's you can't just contract your way out of compliance. It's you can't say, well, this is somebody else was doing this for me. The third party service in this situation was, again, likely, I don't know the details, but was likely doing something wrong. And just because they say on their website we're in compliance, that's not necessarily true. You need to do your diligence and investigate how they are actually operating, if they're licensed, what they're selling through, who they're working with in order to bring the alcohol around the state. So if a distillery were to work with a local retailer like Apple Jacks or Hazel's or one of these bigger retailers in the state that I just happen to hear on the radio, maybe you could work out a way to be able to deliver your brands across the state. But again, there is a specific work through that does not involve carriers. And I just happen to know how Colorado works a little bit more intimately, but I'm sure that it's the same in most other states. Is you go to Kansas, you go to Minnesota, you go to Texas, there are not rules that will say a common carrier, FedEx, UPS, can carry alcohol to a consumer. One thing, USPS itself explicitly prohibits the delivery of alcohol. Even in states where it's legal, they do not service the wine market. So again, if you are working with a service that says, yeah, we use USPS to ship, that should be another big red flag. You just have to be a little bit careful about this, and you read the terms and conditions and check what's going on with them, because there are a lot of questions out there and a lot of people saying things.
And a lot of big red flags. So I appreciate you bringing up a few that are people can look out for. We want to make sure that everyone is looking out for all the potential pitfalls they might have, what they can be aware of. We did have another question that just for you guys to be sort of talking about. We had someone say that they are blending and bottling their beverages. They're just not the distiller themselves. Would they be eligible if they're in a state that allows DTC to be a DTC shipper?
I
My
think,
guess
I
would.
think,
Oops,
oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, you go, you go.
Oh, well, thanks for that. I mean, nice balancing. My guess would be no, is when states, they have these rules that say, one, you need to have a license issued by us in order to ship to our state, our consumers. And the next element is we will only issue this license to a party that can show us a TTB distiller's license and a distillation or a distilled spirits production license from your home state. So again, it depends on how you're licensed, how you're operating. But it seems in that case, it is probably the other third party that it would be the distiller of record and be the one who could get the licenses. So there's some nuances there. It could maybe work out, but if you're just, a white label situation, probably you can't be the shipper yourself.
Okay. Well, good to know, and I guess this is a nice lesson that we all could learn, even if we didn't show up on the first day of law school, that it does depend in almost all situations to make sure we're not crossing any borders. And we've got a couple other questions coming in here, but um, Alex, you mentioned something earlier that triggered for me about sort of whenever there's a petition coming up that encourages people to expand these DTC privileges. I would encourage everyone here to go to shipmyspirits.org, part of the Discus Spirits United platform, where we are encouraging everyone's states to adopt these principles. And we actually have several states that we're sort of thinking about where it was likely to be next. And I would like to turn to my good friend, Andy Deloney here, who has been listening and talking as we've been talking about all these things. And I want to imagine, Andy, if you were sort of watching this webinar back in 2 or 3 years, thinking about what we might have missed. Where is, over the next few years, where do we think there's going to be movement on this that when Bob gives his wonderful presentation on what the landscape looks like, what is going to be added to the 10 states and District of Columbia, or likely to be sort of changing in the next few years that people can look out for?
Sure. Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that. And of course, thank you to Bob and Alex for very good, insightful comments and questions. But before I begin, I would certainly emphasize one of the things that Alex said is a lot of it depends. This isn't sports talk radio where you get asked a question, is it A or B? Well, oftentimes it depends. And with beverage alcohol law, it almost always, it depends. It depends on how the state law is written. So that is one thing we'd certainly want to emphasize for sure. But as consumers over the past couple of decades have increasingly shown their preference for spirits and enjoying distilled spirits and wanting to enjoy them as they've enjoyed other products over the years, there has been more support for gradually growing access to whether it's things like 7-day sales, but certainly direct to consumer. So we certainly give our kudos to our colleagues in the wine industry for the success they've had in getting all but now just a small handful of states. Certainly we hope to be there, as well over the next several years. But we'll start with California. And of course, we all know, and Bob touched on California and the legislation that was just signed there by Governor Newsom. But for the last couple of years, not a whole lot changed in California. They had, of course, a statute that allowed in-state producers only to ship direct to consumer. And of course, since the Granholm decision that has now been referenced many times and will probably continue to be referenced in this call because it's so integral to this. There had been 1-year extensions of the state law. I think it was made clear by the governor, by the California ABC and others that, extending what was viewed very clearly by most to be a problematic statute in terms of its constitutionality for another year. I think it's safe to say, policymakers, they ran out of patience. So the law that was just signed, of course, is the result of that. But Discus will continue, looking forward to 2026 and beyond, will continue to look to find a broader solution to extend to all distillers direct-to-consumer shipping authorization in California. And of course, as Bob said, as part of the Discus principles, we are certainly open to discussing limits as to how much can be received by a consumer, volumetric limits, things like that. But again, extending that authorization to all distillers so that a consumer is not left answering the question, how come I can get this product, but I can't get this product? They're both spirits. They're both 80 proof. Why is one good and one not the other? So continuing into 2026 and beyond, Discus will continue to advocate in California on their law. But looking at a couple of states that have seen some activity in recent sessions, we'll start with Mississippi. Mississippi, of course, is one of the small number of states that did not have any sort of wine direct-to-consumer shipping. Well, wine and spirit shipping has been discussed by lawmakers there for the past couple of legislative sessions. This time around, there was a bill when the session started that would allow it for wine and spirits. It was amended to allow it only for wine, but also amended in such a way, and I certainly don't speak for the Wine Institute, but it was amended in such a way so that the Wine Institute themselves did not support it. And that was, again, because as Bob described, it's a law that requires the producer to ship essentially to a retailer for pickup with geographic limitations as well. So they took a small step, but there is certainly more to do. And again, to be clear, it was only in the wine side. So we will continue to advocate in Mississippi for direct-to-consumer shipping of spirits. Moving to two other states that have also seen some significant legislative activity, I'll go next to Maine. In 2024, Maine, for the first time ever, had a bill to allow spirits direct-to-consumer shipping pass their state Senate. No bill to allow direct-to-consumer shipping of spirits had ever passed either the House or Senate in Maine before. And last year, the bill passed the Senate with Discus support. Now, to be quite frank and candid, we did not expect it to pass the House. We figured it was going to be a tougher row to hoe in the House for a spirits direct-to-consumer shipping bill. However, when the vote came late in the session, it was a very close vote. It was a very close vote. So that gave us some hope for moving forward. Moving forward to this year, so again, in Maine, in 2024, a bill had passed the state Senate for the first time. That had never happened before. Moving forward to this year, after the bill was reported by the Joint Committee in Maine under their rules. They don't have House committees and Senate committees. They have joint committees. And their joint committee had reported the bill to the floor of the House and to the Senate. And this time around, the bill passed both the House and Senate for the first time around. I want to be clear, we had worked with the Bureau of Alcohol, Beverages, and Lottery Operations, or BABLO, their acronym, regarding some of the technical aspects of the bill. I want to be clear, they didn't take a position in support or opposition to it, but we did work with them on some of the technical aspects of the bill. And again, it did pass the Senate again this year, and it did pass the House for the first time ever. However, under Maine's legislative rules, it essentially has to pass twice in both chambers. First is the first passage, then it has to pass for what's called enactment. So the Senate did then pass the bill to enact, but the House did not. It came a few votes shy in the House for that second passage to enact. But again, for the first time, a bill to allow spirits direct-to-consumer shipping in some form passed both houses in Maine. So that is something that has never happened before. So now the thing is, they have a 2-year session like most states, but the bill has essentially been considered to have run its course. It's not going to be brought back up again in 2026. There's nothing really left for it to do. It's run its course, so therefore it won't be back up in 2026. However, we will be continuing our advocacy for it in 2027. Moving next then to Iowa, a state that has also had some significant advocacy and movement on this issue. Again, going back to 2024, there was several hearings, particularly in the House side, and a bill came through House State Government Subcommittee and went through the full committee. That had never happened before. Moving ahead to 2025, for the first time ever, we had bills in both the House and the Senate. And roughly along concurrent timelines, the Senate committees and their respective subcommittees examining this legislation. The subcommittees moved the bill. On the House side, the State Government Committee subcommittee moved the bill to the full committee. That committee then moved it to the Ways and Means Committee. And on the Senate side, for the first time ever, the Senate Commerce's subcommittee on the bill moved the bill to the full Commerce Committee, and the Commerce Committee then moved it as well. That had never happened before. So as the session was beginning to run low on time, they adjourned in Maine. We were able to get the bill to the House floor. That's never happened before. And while a vote was not taken, I can tell you that there were reasons to be confident that there was a sufficient number of votes there for the legislation. Now, to be clear, that's not throwing the votes up on the board. That's not a recorded vote. Sometimes, particularly with legislators, some may tell you things they want to hear, knowing they may never have to hit the red or the green button in support or in opposition to a bill. But again, reasons for optimism there because, again, unprecedented progress on the issue. And there's been a number of changes within the House and the Senate leadership in Iowa. So we expect going into 2026 that because the bill remains alive. It's unlike Maine where the bill had run its course. The bill is still alive going into 2026. And we will continue our advocacy. One of the things that is very important to us in our ability to be successful on this and other issues is working with state organizations. In so many states, of course, there are craft distiller associations and other associations, such as, Bob had talked about Kentucky. The bill could not have gotten done in Kentucky without the very strong leadership and on-the-ground expertise of the Kentucky Distillers Association, a group we're very proud to work with. But part of our success moving forward is going to continue to be working with folks on the ground in those states to advocate for, as Bob talked about, having us in the same conversation with wine. Consumers are used to getting wine shipped to them direct at home. And consumers are increasingly ask the question again, as they increasingly demonstrate their preference for distilled spirits. Hey, why can't I also get this product? So we will continue to advocate in those states as well as others. And of course, a lot of it depends on the situation on the ground. Some states are, if you want to call it, more fertile ground for things like this. So we will continue to analyze the facts as we see them, the lay of the land in state legislatures around the country to continue our advocacy.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. And I will say we did have a question come in that is very similar. So one, I will say to the best point, as Andy is a wonderful advocate and all of our speakers are wonderful advocates for spirits, if you are interested in direct shipping of spirits in your state, you are the best advocate for it. These are issues. We had someone, just a question came in that said, is there a sort of centralized group that is pushing this in all the other states besides the 10 and the District of Columbia? And Bob, you might be able to speak to this a little better than I could, as I am not the attorney, but as I've heard, the United States is basically 51 different nations when it comes to spirits laws. So each state is going to pass their own law. So as much as we would like, hey, the 39 others to come through and say, great, we've approved exactly what you want. Everyone's going to have the same policy. Discus has principles that we believe that the states should adopt. Bob ran through them and he can speak to them more. But it is each individual state that has their own beverage alcohol laws, and they are going to continue to be the supporters and the delineators. Again, Bob, step in if you hear me say anything wrong, but as it all goes back to the 21st Amendment, which gave that power to the states.
You're doing a great job. I would only add one point. There was a Uniform Commission of Laws. I don't know if it was a committee or I'm not sure what it was the UCL, and they came up with their model alcohol beverage laws. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they did not take position on whether they supported equal laws for wine, beer, and spirits. They were silent on the issue. So is that correct, Alex?
Yeah. I think that really they only came down with rules around fulfillment houses was what they ended up being able to decide, largely because they were really working with as many people out there as they could. And it kind of was trying to create a what's the phrase? If you create a camel by committee, you end up with a draft or whatever that is. So yeah, they couldn't quite decide on what it worked out with. And it was unfortunate because, frankly, there is a model bill out there that Wine Institute and the wine industry has been pushing that you can just largely swap out wine for spirits, and it should work very much the same. It's licenses, taxation, reporting, No sales to minors. There is a path forward for this. It just needs more advocacy. And you're absolutely right that it is all in-state advocacy. Thank you. A horse is a camel built by camel is a horse built by committee. That's it. Thank you for that. But it does all come down to in-state advocacy, both distillers, guilds, and consumers. If you are a California distillery going to Texas to change their laws, Texas isn't going to care about you. Texas is going to care about the Texas distilleries, the Texas consumers. And so we really do need 50 state by state local action on this. And so great to see services out there like Ship My Spirits trying to build up that grassroots. If I could say, we have the last few years at Sova Ship Compliant, we have been publishing a survey of consumer data on interest in the direct consumer market, and that has consistently showed over 80%, 90% of regular craft spirits consumers, regular spirits consumers are highly interested in direct consumer shipping. Most of them say they would purchase regularly. Many of them say that their direct shipping purchases would influence their retail purchases. They would look for your brands in retail stores just because they know that it is more available. And the interest in this is even among non-drinkers. We've asked non-drinkers the last few years and gotten around 60% of them agreeing that these rules should change. So there is widespread interest. It's just a matter of getting to consumers and letting them know what they can do to advocate for this and to create a legal, regulated market that is available so people don't have to rely on more questionable practices because they just don't know better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and again, I would just emphasize, as Bob and Alex have, and I'll just do it again, because I did advocate for the restaurant industry in Michigan for almost 10 years, and members would call us all the time, well, can I do this? Well, the law says no. Well, there's a lot of people who are doing it. Well, I can't speak for that. But again, to the point that Alex and Bob are making, again, do your due diligence. Check with your attorneys, check with the regulators in your state. If you're a member of Discus, call us. We can give you our insight as to what a state law says or doesn't say. But don't just, again, there's a lot of people out there who would love to sell you their business or provide a service for you. But just because they're offering it to you, just doesn't mean that's legal.
Absolutely. And Andy, I will use that point as I like to do on all of these webinars, as there is now a time to mention, if you are a member of Discus, please utilize us as a resource. If you are trying to wonder how to make sure you're doing something correctly, please reach out to us, and we are happy to help guide you and make sure that you are doing things the right way, and give you our best understanding of the laws. Obviously, you saw Bob knows this stuff forwards and backwards, so give him a call, or at least give me a call, and I'll see if he's free, because obviously we're trying to help as many people as we can.
I have two points. One is that we also have, not surprisingly, have gotten many inquiries through the years about, is it legal for me to order through this? And then they'll send it to us. And, it doesn't cite any laws or anything, whatever the promotion is. We have to start from scratch and figure out what is there in the statute? And we wind up scratching our heads. We can't find anything. Now, that's not to say they're all contrary to law, but there are certainly a good amount of cases where that is the case. And also, if you're interested in the actual citations or the links to the citations, if you're a Discus member, you have the Discus Summary of State Laws. It's in there. It's a benefit of membership. And for those who are not members, there's a $995 fee, but it's online and it's updated regularly. And it has a lot of information about direct shipping, including something we really haven't discussed today. Well, we didn't discuss retail direct shipping and also litigation. So there's a lot of material in the Discus Summaries of Laws on all of that stuff, and personal sale, personal importations by consumers. So
there you go. And if that is of interest to you, please, again, reach out to us, membership@distilledspirits.org, and you can join as a Discus member. You get access to the Summary of State Laws and so many other wonderful things to reach out to us, and hopefully we can help you with all sorts of issues. Now, we did have one question that just came in about direct-to-consumer in Tennessee. Someone in our chat says they keep hearing murmurs but nothing concrete. Have any of you know anything about the state of DTC in Tennessee other than currently not legal?
Yeah, other than currently not legal, it's, again, there's I'll editorialize here a little bit. Sometimes if you read a local newspaper or watch the local news, you'll see a story. Hey, lawmakers want to do this, that was because a single legislator introduced a bill or something like that. I can tell you within a lot of states, and certainly Tennessee included, there are legislators that would like to do this. But has there been any sort of significant organized coalition put together to advocate in Tennessee? No, not to date. But we know there are legislators there that are very interested in the subject, no question about it. Tennessee, of course, is home to a robust and vibrant distilling community, and some very well-known names down to very interesting craft companies and brands that are out there. So we know there are legislators that want to do that. But there has not been, to my knowledge, any sort of significantly organized effort to do so.
Okay, great. And I know we have gotten questions about Tennessee before. Obviously, Andy, as you are saying, it does have a very robust community of distillers and a strong culture. I mean, Tennessee whiskey is a protected category all on its own. So, it's important to have. And I guess something that I suppose I'm curious about, and we got a question in the chat as well. Do you guys know roughly what the direct consumer market is looking like nationwide these days? How much business are we doing just in the sort of 10 states and District of Columbia that we're allowing right now?
I don't know if you all have any data. Unfortunately, we don't really have a whole lot. Like we say, we see a lot more action within wine shipping, just in availability and awareness of it. So I really can't speak to any numbers. I think because it is a very limited number of states, and especially because a lot of the states that do allow it are, all due fairness to them, are not necessarily the largest states. The volume is almost certainly fairly low. This is why I think it was great to see New York and California adopt their new rules, because I think that this could spur a lot more awareness, a lot more action. And I think that could start to try to get the ball rolling. But it is certainly a more limited market, especially when we're comparing to wine shipping.
Yeah, and New York is Alex brings up New York. It's another good example, of course, where there's been some recent activity with the passage of their law last year. Now, we applauded the small distillers there, the New York State Distillers Guild, for their advocacy in getting that. We could not give our full support to the bill, of course, because of the provisions that Bob talked about, reciprocity. We think there is a it's a questionable provision, and we know that is being tested in federal court, New York's reciprocity provision. But as well as that production limit. But that's another state. Well, we've made clear we'll continue our advocacy to open that up for the distillers of all sizes. But again, as we've said, are there volume limits? We are we are definitely supportive of states putting limits as to how much a distillery can ship to a consumer and how much a consumer can receive. But allowing it for all distillers is going to be important, and New York's another state will continue to advocate.
I will mention one thing. At a NCSLA presentation about 5 years ago, the then chair of or a director of the Virginia ABC put some statistics on the screen there, and I saved them. I just looked in my email that 97% of the U.S. population can order and receive wine by direct shipment, and only 12% of the U.S. population can do the same for spirits. So that's quite a disparity.
Absolutely. And that is a well-found statistic there, Bob. So thank you for bringing that up, because that is a significant disparity that obviously we are all working here to address, because we want to make sure that the many spirits consumers are getting access to their favorite products. Obviously, many of whom are Discus members, because we represent the best and brightest in the industry, as you guys here are all aware. Now, we did have a question in the chat that I was hoping to get you guys, hoping to run by here, that I will admit, as the non-lawyer, I'll let you guys determine on the specifics of it. It was talking about the passage of title theory as it relates to DTC sales. I'll let Alex, that was a knowing nod. Is there anything that you would like to sort of comment or share on that, even if it's a no comment?
Yeah, this is definitely something that we've been aware of the last few years, something that has been increasing. It's something I've written about on a couple occasions. And again, this is just an area I want to say, there are always specifics. I cannot speak to any individual situation. I am not your attorney, so you have to talk to somebody else who knows what you're doing. When I see these passage of title situations, they seem to be operating under a extreme misunderstanding of personal importation laws. Basically, how these work is they are companies that are probably very legitimate retailers. They operate in a state where they have a license, they have a storefront, or maybe they are one of these, in a state that has an online retailer only. How they operate is they will sell their products to consumers and then say the passage of title passes in my state, in California, as an example. And then it is up to the consumer in Texas, Colorado, wherever, to initiate the delivery home to them. And so I, as a retailer, am merely acting as their agent in putting it in a box, bringing it to the UPS store, and putting the label on there. But I'm not responsible. It's the consumer that is responsible for this. The consumer is the one doing all of this. And I think that they're operating under, Bob mentioned them a little bit earlier, personal importation rules. And it is absolutely right that as a Colorado consumer, I could drive to California. I could go to a liquor store there, fill up my trunk, and drive it back to Colorado. There are some volume limits in a lot of states. It's, like 6 cases at a time, so I'm not too worried about hitting that. I could do that as a personal. I could even fly there if I check the luggage and all that. What I cannot do as a consumer is have that delivered by a common carrier. There are no states that I'm aware of that allow any consumer, any non-licensee to work with a carrier like FedEx or UPS and deliver alcohol anywhere in the country. It may shock our morals, our sense of fairness, and what we can do as Americans, that I cannot go to a UPS store in California and say, please ship this bottle of luxurious gin back to my home. The only way that I could bring it back from California is in my luggage or in my trunk. And so there is similarly no way for a retailer to do that on my behalf. And so, this is a nice bit of lawyering there. But again, I think it just fails because even if the retailer is only acting on my direction and they're an agent, I would be doing, as a consumer, I would be doing something illegal by initiating that shipment to begin with. So these passions of title theories are at best making the consumer do something illegal. And because, again, it's your name is on the bottle, if the state sees this happening, they're going to go after the distillery and say, how are you allowing this to happen? Because to a certain extent, if you're working with a third party, you similarly to this Colorado distillery was using a third party shipper to ship within the state. The distillery is still the principal party in this operation. And if the state has jurisdictional authority over you, they're going to have questions and they're going to come after you and going to do some enforcement and saying you're not doing things right. So, these are definitely one of those areas that I cannot say they are right or wrong. I would just have a lot of pointed questions if I were in your shoes about them.
Yep, and I would just say, I'll just say really quick, as I chaired the Michigan Liquor Control Commission for 8 years, so I'll put my former regulator hat back on briefly, without divulging all the advice that we were given by the Department of Attorney General in Michigan. I can tell you because that issue came up, or the question came up, and I'll just say that under, at least, again, depends on the state, of course, depends on how your law is written, but at least under Michigan law, which does allow direct-to-consumer shipping of wine, of course, that it was viewed very skeptically. I'll just put it that way, at best. And this was even a subject just last week, the National Conference of State Liquor Administrators. They had a great panel. There were representatives of the Wine Institute, RNDC, WSWA that were on that panel, and it was briefly discussed. And again, without wanting to put words in any of the panelists' mouth, I think there was some great skepticism as to the legitimacy, if you will, of that theory.
Yeah, I know the Tennessee ABC issued something earlier this year directly on this point, saying that it's not permissible, speaking to wine shippers. So it wasn't even, specific to spirits. It's everybody is in this restriction.
And I think they were one of the two states that brought the lawsuits under the federal law for illegal direct shipments, and they collected a lot of money, I think, from illegal direct shippers. I just wanted to add, I agree with everything that Alex and Andy said on this. However, there are two states that actually have special personal import permits, and it's Connecticut and Hawaii, and it is in the summary of state laws, and it's linked there too. But in other words, you can get a permit, and it's good for, I don't know, a period of months or days or whatever it is, and it gives you the right as an individual consumer to have it imported under the scheme they have. So, but that's only two states. So once again, you need to read the laws of the state. So
yeah. And I think even in those cases, it's not like, oh, I can just go to a random retailer's website and then have them delivered to me.
Right.
Yeah. So that is a wonderful flag. Thank you, Bob. And it is, again, important, as I think my big takeaway from this webinar, and I hopefully a lot of other people's, is that if you are a distillery or a spirits producer in your state, make sure you understand what your state liquor control board believes, how they interpret their state laws, and because they are the ones that will be the enforcement mechanism for you. So, if you disagree on what the law says with them, chances are they're the ones that decide whether or not which of you is correct. So make sure you understand what they have. Now, I know we're a little over time, so I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Before I let you go, we have a couple of things that are going to be dropping in the chat just now. We have webinars similar to this coming up. Next week, we have Behind the Label, What Whiskey Drinkers Value versus How Distilleries Deliver. That'll be on October 23rd at 1 p.m. We hope to see you all there. 2 weeks after that, we have Bottling Sustainability, Reimagining Packaging for Spirits and Wine. That'll be November 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We encourage everyone to register for those. If you enjoyed today's webinar, please let us know. Please tune into future Ask the Expert webinars. We want to make sure that these are as helpful for you all as possible. And lastly, March 3rd through 5th, 2026, the Discus Conference will be happening in Louisville, Kentucky. If you are interested in registering for that or have any questions about it, please let us know. I believe all three smiling faces on this call will be there with us, so it'll be a great time. We look forward to seeing you all there. I want to thank Andy, Bob, and Alex for giving their time, their expertise to all of you. I know we had a few more questions and chats that came through. If you guys had a question that did not get answered, please reach out to us. We will try to go through and find any questions that we were not able to answer for you and reach out to you as well. But if you have anything you need, you can reach out to any of us. Again, membership@distilledspirits.org. You can reach any of our Discus members. And if you have any questions for Alex, we'd be happy to pass you along to him as well and his team at Sovos Ship Compliant that are wonderful partner members of Discus and have been doing great resources. Gentlemen, any final closing words?
Just thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you guys next week.